All right, welcome back. On today's Do Now, I wanted you thinking about if you were alive in the 60s, do you think you'd be part of that hippie culture, the protest music that would go to Woodstock and fight back against traditional culture, fight for equal rights, fight against Vietnam? Or is that just not your thing? Did you not really find that to be a very positive culture? Today, we're going to be looking at more of the culture of the 1960s, not just hippie culture. We'll start with some economics. Here's a McDonald's menu from the 60s. This is the whole menu. Yeah, so they got hamburger, cheeseburger, they got french fries, variety of drinks. If you notice the price, not so bad, right? Everything's under 20 cents, 19 cents, or 20 cents for a milkshake. Everything else is pretty cheap. Here's the cost of living. A house costs $13,000. People are making about $6,000 a year. Cars are about $3,000. Tuition to college was a $1,500. A movie was $1.25. Gasoline 29 cents a gallon. Everything was pretty cheap. So the 1960s economically was still pretty strong. It wasn't quite as wealthy as the 50s, but it was still pretty good. People were making a lot of money. Usually the dad of the family was working, didn't need a college degree, could get a job good enough to buy a house, two cars, have three, four kids, and be able to afford everything. It was one income could still afford a lot in the 1960s. So during this decade, people are very wealthy, and as a result, there's going to be a flourishing culture, lots of different stuff going on. So we're going to go through different aspects of culture, and today you're going to get a chance to research whatever kind of culture you're interested, whether it's cars or music or movies or fashion or whatever it is. So here's some examples of the TV shows. You get things like Batman. This is a show called um, Gilligan's Island. People are lost on island. If you notice, these are in color. 1960s, you start getting color television. Not everything was in color. There's a show called The Twilight Zone was still in black and white. But you get a lot more sort of TV shows, TV options, and this time in color. Still with very basic, you'd still get only like three channels. That was it. There was no cable, there are no streaming options, obviously. Very limited choices. Lots of different movies, Planet of the Apes, Sound of Music, James Bond. There's going to be cartoons. There's the Jungle Book. Disney's going to start producing a lot of stuff in the 60s. So there's going to be a lot of movies. Not as many as today. A lot of them are going to be in black and white still. Here's some examples of cars you might find in the 1960s. Family cars, the hippie sort of Volkswagen car. Then you have some muscle cars as well. There's examples of fashion. There's the hippie fashion we saw yesterday. This was more traditional fashion for teenagers. Sports, basketball is going to start becoming bigger. The NBA is going to start becoming a bigger thing nationwide. Soccer's there, but it's not really that big in the United States. It's still mostly baseball and boxing are still the number one and number two. Football's starting, right? The Super Bowl starts in the 60s. So football's there. But by far, it's really baseball's taking over as the number one. Boxing's there, but not quite as big as it was in the 50s. Those are the major sports nationwide. Some pictures of technology. We got home landlines, color TV. Like I said, is going to be big. They start getting cassette for music. A lot of records still, but like cassettes start coming out in the late 60s. And here's a computer. I start getting the first computers. They're not in homes or anything, but big companies, NASA, places like that are using computers. Um, the calculator you use in math class is 10 times more powerful than this computer you're seeing in this picture. And that computer took up the entire room. So they didn't do a whole lot, but they were instrumental in advancing technology and things like NASA and all that. All right, so as far as music go, early 60s, still a lot like the 1950s. You have that sort of doo-wop, pop music, um, rock and roll's there, but it's starting to change the attitude. It's not as fun, light music as it was. It's a little bit more protest music, taking on bigger issues. and you start getting a little bit more variety. So we'll listen to a few songs. First, we got the Beach Boys as a song we'll listen to. Listen to a female group called the Crystals. Um, One of the biggest things about the 1960s is something called the British Invasion. And this is when a lot of British bands start becoming very famous and they come to the United States. If you ever heard of the Beatles, easily the biggest musical group of all time, best selling. Crazy thing, they were only around for like 7 years or something. So insanely famous and successful in a very short time. Rolling Stones, which has been around for a long time, also a British band that sort of took over America for a while. So here are the Beatles. We'll listen to a couple of their songs. And then here we got the Rolling Stones. We'll listen to one of their songs as well. And last, we got Jimi Hendrix, very famous guitar player. We'll listen to one of his songs. Oh, sorry, we got Janis Joplin as well. We'll listen to Janis Joplin. When we're done, don't worry about finishing competency. You're going to research cultural aspects. You're going to pick the stuff you're interested in. Do you think about cars or fashion and makeup, or do you want to learn about music? Explore what you want to explore and research what you want to research first.